Greetings everyone, I am Krisha and today I will be talking about the 11th chapter of Jain Macroeconomics, the foreign exchange rate. So foreign exchange refers to foreign currency in a nation, and foreign exchange rate is the value of our domestic currency whenever we go abroad. As in right now, $1 is roughly equal to 79 or 80 INR. So that is the rate of exchange of our domestic currency rupee in relation to the domestic currency of USA, the US dollars. And the second subpart we have of this chapter includes the flexible and fixed exchange rate. Flexible exchange rate is that exchange rate which is determined by the market forces of demand and supply, and the fixed exchange rate is that exchange rate which is determined by the intervention of the government. So about the flexible exchange rate first, this is also known as the par rate of exchange and equilibrium rate of exchange. Under this we've got two curves, the demand curve and the supply curve, and the demand curve goes down, it's downward sloping, indicating the demand is inversely related to the price, the rate of exchange, and the supply curve moves upwards, which means it is directly related to, the supply is directly related to the rate of exchange. Then as we know, equilibrium is struck when two curves intersect each other, and the point of intersection over here is known as the point where the rate of exchange falls, the point of rate of exchange. And then we've got the impacts of changes in demand and supply. If demand rises, the exchange rate rises as well, and if demand happens to falls, the rate of exchange falls as well. But contrastingly with the supply, if the supply moves ahead, the rate of exchange falls, and if supply goes behind, the rate of exchange rises. So these are all the changes in the demand and supply curve and how the equilibrium is struck. And then after that, secondly, we've got about fixed exchange rate. So fixed exchange rate is that exchange rate which is determined by the intervention of the government and not by the market forces of demand and supply. So sometimes the government sets the rate of exchange way above the point of equilibrium by the market demand and supply, and that is when the demand is less than the supply, and this whole operation is known as a devaluation of the domestic currency or devaluation of rupee, as it was done in 1991. Then secondly, we've got devaluation is done deliberately, and depreciation in the last case, as in whenever the value of 1 INR falls, it was done by the market forces of demand and supply. Devaluation is deliberately by the government. Then secondly, we've got when exchange rate is by the government is set lower than the rate of exchange set by the market forces of demand and supply. In that case, demand is more than the supply, and this whole operation is known as the revaluation of the domestic currency. So revaluation is deliberately done by the intervention of government, and appreciation is done by the market forces of demand and supply with no whatsoever role of the government. Then after that, we've got two systems. The gold standard system of exchange rate, number one, an old variant in which each currency of all the nations, this was used prior to 1920s, around First and Second World War. In this case, all international currencies, currencies of all the nations are directly linked to the value of the gold, as in each currency can be measured in terms of gold. But the second case over here is of the Bretton Woods system of exchange rate. In here, it is, although in the end all the currencies are linked to gold, but we also have a middle player over here which is known as the US dollars. So this under this, $1 is linked to somewhat value of gold, and then all other currencies are linked to US dollars and not directly to gold, but yes, indirectly they are based on gold as well. This is also, as each currency is pegged to $1, this is also known as the adjustable peg system, but it was abandoned in 1977 because the world did not have so much of its gold reserves available for all the currencies. Then the third subpart over here we've got is about the managed floating. Managed floating is you can say a combination of fixed and it is known as the fixed and flexible exchange rate. So although the determination of exchange rate is left with the market forces of demand and supply, but however the government sometimes does intervene for the welfare of the state and the stability of the domestic currency in the foreign world. So after that, we've also got the term of dirty floating, but we do not have, it's almost synonymous over here, although there is a difference, but we do not have much explained in our book. Then next we've got the components of demand for foreign exchange, or also known as why is foreign exchange demanded in a country. So we've got the uses as repayment of international loans, investment in rest of the world, imports, direct purchases abroad, as in when we are tourists and we are visiting Canada, US, anywhere, we spend in their currency, so that is where the foreign exchange is being spent. We've got grants and donations. These are the unilateral payments. Then we've got payment, the factor income to abroad, which we minus from the national income accounting. And then lastly, we've got speculative trading. So when we add up all these components, we get aggregate demand with us. And the fifth subpart, we've got the components of supply of foreign exchange, or the sources of foreign exchange into a country, like the inflow of the foreign exchange into India. So we've got the opposites of whatever we discussed in the last subpart, the exports, investments from rest of the world in the form of foreign institutional investments and foreign direct investments, FII and FDIs. Then we've got direct purchases by rest of the world, loans from rest of the world, grants and donations, the unilateral payments into India, the factor income receipts, which is the factor income from abroad, which is added into the national income accounting. And lastly, we've got the money sent into India by the non-residents, and this is all known as the aggregate supply when we add all of them up. The last topic we've got is about the foreign exchange market, and with two subparts, functions and operations of foreign exchange market. The functions include a transfer functions, which means transfer of purchasing power from one nation to another nation. The second we've got is about credit function, which is giving out of loans and the repayments of loans in the international market. And lastly, we've got the hedging function, which is fairly important, and it is coined as the protection against the risk in the ups and downs of the foreign exchange rate, and it is locked for future contracts, etc. Then we've got the operation of foreign exchange market, under which we've got two: spot market or the current market, in which the transactions are of daily nature, and the exchange rate being followed at those transactions are the ones which are prevailing at that point of time. There is no use of hedging function over here. And lastly, we've got the forward market, which means that the contracts are signed today, but they are materialized or honored somewhere in the future. So hedging is incorporated sometimes into this case, and often the forward transactions are contracted for two reasons, which are given as: number one, to avoid the risk of any adverse changes in the exchange rate, like let's suppose exchange rate was fixed at X, and sometimes X really shoots up, it spikes, or it falls hard. So that's why the hedging function or the contracted forward transactions come into place. And lastly, the reason is why forward transactions are contracted: to make speculative gains in trading activities. So that was all for the last chapter of TRJ and macroeconomics, the foreign exchange rate.